was a Tuesday afternoon, just like any other. I was coming home from school, and I had a big announcement to tell Mom. I was kind of nervous. Be a big change in my life. I go in, could smell the chocolate chip cookies she's been baking. She's preparing dinner. She's Scottish, so it was some sort of, meat and potatoes, shepherd's pie, perhaps. I come in the kitchen. I said, Mom, I'm going to become a vegetarian. Stops, just looks at me, and still gonna eat this supper, aren't you? Well, that turned into a bit of a coming-of-age speech. She says, Malcolm, I support you, but I can't help you. She was going through a divorce at the time and didn't have the emotional capacity, nor did she have the know-how, right? I was raised standard American diet. Again, my mother's Scottish, so meat and potatoes, plenty of junk food. At that time, I really knew how to make myself Pop-Tarts, grilled cheese, and my favorite meal of the day were breakfast cereals. Fruit Loops, Lucky Charms, these kinds of things. And at that moment, my mother said, you're on your own. So overnight, it went from meat potatoes to just potatoes, and it didn't go so well. Barely had enough energy to make it through the day. But I was committed. When I first started this idea of becoming a vegetarian, it was, I think, my only way of maybe attempting to try and solve the problems I saw around me. I was raised in Northwest Calgary, suburban neighborhood. In fact, a brand new community. We were the 10th house built and the 3rd house occupied. And all around me at that time, I saw beautiful, quaint fields and nature be destroyed, be ripped up. I had friends that were animal rights activists. I had been reading books, and now you can watch all the different documentaries, like Cowspiracy and this and that say, if you want to help save the planet, you got to eat plant foods, be a vegetarian. So I took it on, 100%. And it took a long time for me to try and figure out how to be able to feed myself, just primarily with plants. Going from that junk food diet to a whole food diet, just kept going down, deeper down the rabbit hole, to vegan, to raw vegan. And intertwined through that whole journey was a journey of spirituality. I was raised, I don't even like to use the word atheist because I didn't even identify with that. I hadn't even heard that word. I think I'd maybe heard the word God once in my entire childhood. I had friends, some of them that went to church and never thought about it. I went once just out of curiosity to see what it was all about. But for us, nature was our church, if we want to view it in that way. So with that nature, that foundation, got into yoga, got into meditation, which just affirmed my belief in being a vegetarian, to do less harm, to create more peace in the world through what I ate. It's a very noble ambition. I got a little bit up on my high horse of righteousness, became really extreme about food and nutrition, would point the finger. Oh, if you're eating meat, you're a bad person. You're part of the problem. Come to my side. I'll show you the way. But inside, I knew I wasn't quite right. Just how I was feeling. And I thought, well, if I keep changing one thing or another, if I keep adding in another food, if I do another cleanse, if I try out a new superfood, a new herb, maybe then I'll start feeling better. And so I went down the rabbit hole. At points, I think I was contemplating becoming a breatharian. Right? I mean, if you really get into it, it's like, wow, I'm taking the life of another. Even a nut. I mean, the seed, it's a potential of more life. How far can we go? And then I started to have dreams. I started to get messages that would be coming through, not just, maybe I'm not doing things right. I have a dream that I needed to eat animals. It was very interesting. I'd just be listening to podcasts, and the person I'm interviewing would be talking about their shift, how they're extreme, like very similar. I could see myself in their shoes, and they said, you know what? And then I had this shift. So despite having, all those years, it was 10, 12 years of building up this ideology, this philosophy about how vegetarian is the way to go. Intellectually, I was so convinced, and I would try and convince you as well. Something inside was telling me that there was different. So I contemplated this ending, and I put away and aside all my belief systems, and I said, well, what if? How about if I just put all that aside and I just test it for my own experience? I had sayings like, milk is murder. You are what you eat, and I don't eat death. What if I just put all that aside? And how will it really feel? So my wife and I, we went out for sushi, because I was still into this raw food idea. It's like, okay, well, if we're going to eat it, it's going to have to be wild, and it's going to have to be raw. So we went out for sashimi, right? Just like raw fish on the plate. No rice, nothing. And I ate it, and it was absolutely amazing. I felt like it just dissolved into my body. I left that restaurant feeling like I could swim upstream. And as we were leaving, I probably had 5 or 6 pieces. We're like, I need some more. And you can't just turn right back around and go into the same restaurant you went into. So we had to go find another sushi restaurant. And we ate some more. And then I had to deal with this ending of this identity that I'd built for myself, being this righteous vegetarian that was, so right in my belief systems, and coming to grips with that. And one thing that really helped was, especially coming from, a lot of it was tied up into this kind of these spiritual ideologies. I was studying yoga and meditation, this idea of ascension. It was all about ascending, how could I get to the next cosmic realms? And then I began to embrace more like a Native American view of spirituality. And I don't know if this is true or not, but this idea of revering the land, revering the animals. And I heard that, in fact, that it's a Native American wisdom. It's a sign of coming of age when you come to that understanding that in order for you to live, something else must die. Someone else must die. A mother, a father, a sister, a brother, an aunt, an uncle. Someone else must die. How do you take that in? And again, I imagine, I don't know if it was this way, but I imagine how the Native Americans or any indigenous culture that was truly connected to the land, that was truly connected to the plants, the animals, food took on a different meaning. Recently, I took a trip out to Vancouver Island, and I was on the plane, and I was reading an article about head smashed in buffalo jump. And there was a man, he was quoting, about those experiences of how they would organize the hunt, right, of charging the bison off the cliff, where several hundred might die. And they said it wasn't a celebration. They didn't cheer. It was very sacred and reverential. And they honored the bison so much because they knew it had to die for them to live. The other interesting thing was being such a plant person. I'm really a plant guy. I revered plants, loved plants. That was my life. Yet I ate them without thought. Oh, I don't eat animals because, but, eat plants, no problem. And what do we know? The science is coming out more and more about plants have feelings, plants can communicate, plants are beings too, right? They have young, they care for their young. Bit of a side tangent, but basically there are 4 things that we eat. A lot of us were raised with the Canada Food Guide. We get it in school. Not the most helpful of food guides. So I'd like to give you another one. I like to describe this as the ancestral food guide, or I like to call the natural food guide, right? It's what humans all around the world, it's what we naturally eat. And there are 4 food groups. You can consider these the kingdoms of life, types of beings, right? So we have plants, pretty obvious. We have animals as a kingdom, as a food group that we eat. We have bacteria, and we have fungi. And for the longest time, I was trying to just eat from the plant kingdom. And I think as animals, we associate more with the rest of the animal kingdom. And that's where that sense of like, empathy, there's pescatarians who are like, well, I can't quite relate to a fish as much, so they're okay to eat. But this is all of life, right? I believe if we go to its depths, we can relate to animals. We can relate to that bond and to that kinship and that loss of life. And most of us just turn a blind eye, right? And then if we face it, my reaction was to, okay, well, I'm just going to be over here. I'm just going to only eat plants. But I think the true, much more spiritual path in eating and showing up and being in this world is to know that we're omnivores and that everything is living. Everything is a being that has young, that cares for its young, and wants to live. In order for you to live, someone must die. So in knowing that, how do you move forward? So I think it's about revering the life that you take, whether it be a plant, animal, bacteria, or fungi. There's intelligence, there's sentience there. It's a tough one to consume your food in that way, to every moment have that presence and have that reverence. But I think that's really the only way through. We can try and put it out of our mind, we could ignore it, but I think the goal of life is to be more conscious, to be more awake. And food, 3 times a day plus snacks in between, we get that opportunity to really reflect on the life that we have and that the life that we're consuming. And what are we going to do with that life? Another being, be it plant, animal, bacteria, fungi, has given its life for you to live. So what are you going to do with your life? That's all I got for you.